The Japanese resistance was fierce, but before they surrendered, they went on a rampage, slaughtering civilians and leaving Manila one of the most devastated cities in the entire war. Our triumphant GIs handing out food and Hershey bars became hopeful symbols of an enduring American commitment.
With this ceremony, a new nation is born.
On July 4th, 1946, General MacArthur presided as Washington granted the Philippines independence. But it was more formal than real. MacArthur quickly restored America's influence and many conservatives and collaborators from the old Philippine power structure. Our anti-Japanese allies, the Huks, demanded reform. The demands were ignored. The Huks launched a guerrilla war. With the Cold War heating up, America saw the Huks as part of a worldwide communist conspiracy. The Philippines became a testing ground for a new strategy in Asia. Encourage democracy and land reform to win peasant support. At the same time, take on the guerrillas with the counterinsurgency techniques of the newly created CIA. One of the CIA's early tacticians in Asia was a young history professor just out of Harvard, Joe Smith.
We wanted to prevent communist control, and besides, we knew that what we had to offer was the best of the political systems that the world had ever known.
The CIA dispatched one of its most clever covert operatives to the Philippines, Colonel Edward Lansdale. He taught their military new propaganda and terror techniques. But he also picked Ramon Magsaysay from outside the corrupt Old Boys network to run for the presidency. Our guy Magsaysay was their slogan. When he was elected and began his land reform program, Washington thought it had found the answer to Third World Revolution.
Well, the term was invented in the age called the Magsaysay solution. In other words, in other places in Asia where there was trouble, if you could just find a man like that, get him in power and help him and get him established, that would solve the problem.
In 1957, Magsaysay died in a plane crash. His land reform program died with him. By then, the Huks had been defeated, and Lansdale and his counterinsurgency experts were now needed in the new hotspot in Southeast Asia, Vietnam. But the darker side of the Lansdale legacy had taken firm hold in the Philippine military.
The choice that was given to us was a choice between black and white, between freedom and slavery, between totalitarianism and democracy. And that has been the most insidious influence in the military thinking, because up to now it persists. When you have a proliferation of safe houses, which become places of arrests, apprehensions, tortures, then anything goes. In the fight against communism, all is fair.
In 1965, a bright, ambitious senator, Ferdinand Marcos, won the Philippine presidency. Eager for Asian allies to support our fight against communism, President Lyndon Johnson invited Marcos to the White House. The media compared Ferdinand and his beautiful wife Imelda to JFK and Jackie, and Marcos knew how to play on our sentimentality.
For over 7 decades, your nation and mine have walked the path of democracy. We have followed you, and we do not regret it.
It was Marcos' commitment to anti-communism, not democracy, that won him unquestioning American support. Marcos extracted billions in aid, most of which he squandered on his own political fortunes. As living conditions got worse, people turned against the corrupt couple. In 1972, Marcos declared martial law. He suspended the Constitution, closed the Congress, and systematically imprisoned, tortured and murdered his political opponents. Our showplace of democracy had become a brutal dictatorship. But American aid actually increased.
What many Filipinos began to wonder was if the United States stood for democratic principles and was the standard bearer of the free world, no? How come they were supporting, it was supporting, a dictator like Mr. Marcos, who precisely became the enemy of those democratic principles that many Filipinos learned about from the United States.
Many Filipinos lost faith in America because Washington never officially condemned the dictator. 4 successive administrations tolerated the savage regime in the name of anti-communism.
Our president, our country has a deep commitment in the Pacific, a great respect not only for the Philippines but for the other ASEAN countries. We love your adherence to democratic principle and to the democratic processes.
If you remember, some years ago, Mr. Bush congratulated Ferdinand Marcos for his adherence to democratic principles. And while he was saying that, hundreds of thousands of Filipinos were incarcerated, thrown into jails for their own political beliefs. Thousands of Filipinos were found salvaged. Salvage is a term they use for summary execution, just to make people disappear. So many have disappeared without a trace. And this can all be traced back to that defense establishment that Ferdinand Marcos built with the help of the United States to ensure that he would stay in power for 20 years.
The turning point came in 1983 when Ninoy Aquino, Marcos' chief rival, returned from the United States to challenge the dictator's authority. As Marcos' soldiers led him from the plane, he was assassinated. The world was horrified, and when Aquino's widow, Cory, decided to carry on the fight against the dictator, the White House finally advised Marcos to go. American TV audiences were mesmerized as Mrs. Aquino rallied the long-suffering nation to a bloodless rebellion and became its new president.
Ninoy believed that only the united strength of a people would suffice to overturn a tyranny so evil and so well organized.
We saw the best of our democratic tradition in the phenomenon of people power, inspiring great hopes for Cory's presidency. But no amount of celebration could erase the bitter economic reality that Marcos left behind. Today, 3/4 of the nation barely survive. Without land reform, the gap between rich and poor continues to grow, despite American aid. The economy of the country is still dominated by huge plantations owned by a few wealthy families, including relatives of Cory Aquino. It is this landed elite that continues to stifle economic reform. To earn a decent living, some 500,000 of the best and brightest leave each year. There are over 1 million Filipinos here, making them the largest group of Asians in the United States. 27-year-old Lea Liwanag is one of the 12,000 Philippine nurses working in New York City hospitals.
I came to New York with the sole objective of helping my family. I think it's a matter of life and death that someone has to help. So I just studied nursing.
Lea and many of her friends, like Tet Santa Maria, were educated in the Philippines, but they fill the nursing shortage in the United States.
I finished college and nursing, not to take care of my people, but to take care of these people. These are now my people.
Sometimes with the loneliness I have, and the situation I am in, the hard work I have to do.